The night was alive with chaos. The radio hissed and spat static, drowning in the roar of gunfire. A frantic voice cut through the interference. Bravo 6 is pinned. No visual on shooter. Requesting cover. God, they're everywhere. 8 of America's most lethal warriors, Navy SEALs, were trapped in a jagged ravine carved deep into the Afghan mountains. Gunfire thundered from 3 different ridges, bouncing off stone and dirt like endless firecrackers. Their exits were sealed. Their snipers were gone. Death was closing in like a tightening noose. Then it happened. A single rifle crack split the darkness. It wasn't wild or desperate. It was precise. A bullet traveled more than 2 kilometers through the cold mountain air and found its mark. The enemy machine gunner on the eastern ridge dropped instantly, his weapon clattering uselessly against the rocks. The ravine went quiet, just for a breath. 10 seconds later, another shot. Another impossible hit. The SEALs froze, exchanging confused glances. Who the hell was out there? Then their radio sparked back to life, carrying a voice none of them recognized. Shadow 9 active. Providing overwatch. Stand by for extraction window. The voice was calm, cold, controlled. Whoever it was, they weren't on any roster. Forward Operating Base Sentinel, a hidden fortress tucked into the Afghan highlands. Inside the armory, Emma Varga moved like a ghost among rifles and ammunition. At 42 years old, she blended into the background, just another figure behind the warfighters. She wasn't built like the young soldiers who swaggered past her, muscles rippling beneath desert fatigues. Her body betrayed age and old injuries. Her left hand trembled as she tightened a wrap around her wrist. Not just any wrap. It was advanced tech, magnetic therapy designed first for astronauts, now repurposed for soldiers with nerve damage. Along with the expensive medication she swallowed that morning, it was the only reason her hands could still hold steady long enough to calibrate a rifle scope. Most soldiers never gave Emma a second glance. To them, she was just support staff. The one who kept their weapons ready while they went off to do the real fighting. But Emma carried a silence heavier than the rifles she maintained. A silence born of shadows and ghosts. "Hey, Reynolds," a young voice sneered across the room. Corporal Michael Mason, fresh out of sniper school, leaned against a workbench, smirking. His squad mate shifted uncomfortably beside him. "Looks like they're letting anyone handle our weapons now. Even old ladies who can barely lift them." A few soldiers chuckled nervously. Emma didn't look up. She just kept inspecting the rifle in her hands, her fingers gliding over the barrel with the intimacy of someone who had held one far too many times. What Mason didn't see was the flicker in her eyes. Not pain, not embarrassment, patience, the kind forged under fire, when mockery meant nothing compared to bullets tearing the air around you. Emma's hands moved with a precision that only years of muscle memory could explain. And without even thinking, she angled herself with a clear view of every entrance, her body naturally sliding into the habits of survival. The door swung open. Captain Robert Torres strode in with a clipboard in hand, his gaze sharp. He noticed Emma instantly, tucked away in the corner. Unlike the others, Torres had been around long enough to recognize the signs. The hypervigilance, the flinch at sudden noise, the deliberate, calculated movements. He'd seen her personnel file, or at least the parts that weren't blacked out with thick classification stamps. "Varga," he called. His tone carried a weight the younger soldiers didn't understand. "Double-check the scopes on the long rifles. Team Bravo is moving out tonight." Emma gave a small nod, not looking up. But Torres noticed the faint tension in her shoulders. She knew what that meant. Bravo's mission was no routine patrol. It was high risk, deep in Taliban-held territory. One misaligned scope, and a soldier wouldn't be coming home. The armory buzzed with its usual pre-mission rhythm. Gear checks, nervous laughter, dark jokes to mask the fear. Emma worked in her corner, silent and methodical. Every so often, she pulled out a battered notebook filled with strange markings, symbols that looked like broken Morse code. A private encryption she'd invented years ago, Back when privacy was impossible and survival meant hiding messages in plain sight. At precisely 2 p.m., Emma's body went rigid, just for a heartbeat. Then she forced herself to relax. 2 o'clock. The exact time her spotter, Martinez, had taken a bullet meant for her 5 years ago. She could still feel his blood seeping between her fingers. Still hear herself whispering apologies for a shot she'd missed by millimeters. Her damaged hearing betraying her at the worst possible moment. The breaking point. "You know what I heard?" Mason's voice cut across the armory again. Louder this time. She got transferred here because she couldn't hack it in a real unit. Probably some diversity higher who got people killed. The words slithered through the air like poison gas. No one spoke. The silence was worse than laughter. Emma's knuckles whitened around the rifle barrel. For a moment, her gray eyes went cold, calculating, dangerous. Then, with deliberate care, she set the weapon down and turned to face him. "You're right," she said softly. Her accent was hard to place, maybe Serbian, maybe Croatian. "I did get people killed. 3 of them. Their names were Martinez, Rix, and Yao." The armory fell dead silent. Only the distant thump of helicopters broke the air. Mason's smirk faltered, but he pushed forward, trying to save face. "Sure. Tell us your sad story. I'm sure it's real heroic." Emma rolled up her sleeve. Her forearm was crisscrossed with scars, not random, but carved with brutal precision. "These are coordinates," she said quietly. "I carved them with metal while I was held for 72 hours in a Taliban compound." The intel led to the largest raid of 2018. 43 enemy killed. 6 Americans rescued alive. But I was 3 minutes too late to save my own team. Her sleeve dropped. Silence crushed the room. Captain Torres stepped forward, his presence like a shield between her and the boy who didn't yet know what war truly cost. "That's enough," Torres said firmly. His eyes locked on Emma. "Vargo, walk with me." As they moved down the corridor, Torres spoke low. "You didn't have to tell him that." "No," Emma answered. "But he's deploying tonight. If my story makes him a little less cocky, a little more careful, maybe he comes home alive." Torres studied her, seeing not the trembling hands or the scarred skin, but the survivor, the fighter, the ghost who never left the war behind. But deep down, Emma already knew the truth. The mission Bravo was walking into tonight felt wrong. Too clean. Too perfect. She'd seen this pattern before. And last time, it had cost her everything. What secret passed was Emma hiding from the rest of the base. And why did the mission about to unfold feel hauntingly familiar, like a trap already sprung? The sun had already dipped behind the jagged peaks when the forward operating base began to shift into mission mode. Helicopters rumbled on the flight line. Boots pounded on gravel. The metallic clatter of rifles being racked and checked echoed like a steady drumbeat of war. Emma sat alone in a dimly lit comms room, her back against the cold wall, a hard case resting across her knees. She'd unlocked it with trembling hands, and inside lay a relic she hadn't touched in years. Her Chetak M200 intervention rifle. Sleek, heavy, and scarred with notches on its stock. 3 notches. 3 ghosts. Her gray eyes lingered on them. Martinez. Rix. Yao. For a moment, her chest tightened. Memories she'd buried clawed their way back. Sandstorms in Fallujah, whispered missions that never made it into the records. The day her entire unit vanished into a valley rigged with betrayal. Her old codename resurfaced in her mind like an echo. Ghost Eye. Back then, she'd been the youngest sniper in an unofficial unit, one that didn't exist on paper. Unit 19. Ghosts. Shadows. They were precision shooters who operated so far in the dark that even victories were denied them. Failures? Buried with them. Emma had been their only woman. The best shot. Until the day she wasn't. Now here she was, stripped of the uniform, forgotten in an armory, dismissed as a broken technician. But Torres saw it. He always had. That's why he'd come to her now. Torres slid a tablet across the table. The digital map glowed with mission parameters. Team Bravo, 6 men, Insertion at 2,300 hours. Reconnaissance into Taliban-held valley. Suspected command post here. His finger tapped a blinking red marker. Intel suggests minimal resistance. Emma's jaw tightened. Too clean, she murmured. Almost scripted. Torres nodded grimly. I thought the same. The reports, the timings, it reminds me of Kandahar. The leak. Emma's gaze snapped up, piercing. A trap. Torres let out a slow breath. I can't change the mission without proof. But if someone with your experience kept eyes on them, maybe we'd know before it's too late. Emma studied the map. Distances, ridgelines, wind corridors. All calculated in her head without effort. The muscle memory of a hunter. I'll need access to the long-range comms array, she said. And my old kit. Torres gave a small, grim smile. Already unlocked. Elsewhere, Corporal Mason sat on his bunk, uncharacteristically quiet. The bravado that had dripped from him earlier was gone. His hands moved methodically over his rifle, checking every screw, every round. Her words, Martinez Fricks, yow, still hung in his mind like a curse. For the first time, he felt the weight of what it meant to go out there. That cocky laugh of his seemed a lifetime away. Midnight came. The mountains lay wrapped in silence, the kind only Afghanistan could conjure. Thick, watchful, waiting. Team Bravo boarded their Blackhawks, blades chopping through the night as the aircraft lifted them into darkness. From above, the valleys looked like open hands, ready to close into fists. Emma sat hunched in the forgotten corner of the comms building. She'd set up her monitoring station with gear few even knew existed. Radios hummed to life, screens flickered with encrypted signals. She tapped into patterns of enemy chatter, her tablet running algorithms originally designed for Wall Street trading, now twisted for war. It didn't take long for the truth to reveal itself. The command post wasn't real. The valley was bait. The enemy wasn't scattered, they were waiting. Emma's pulse quickened. She tried to send warnings through official channels, but the mission was already in motion. No commander would abort now, not on the suspicion of a support staff tech. So she did what she always did. She improvised. The helicopters set Bravo down just outside the valley. Dust whipped around them as they moved fast, rifles up, night vision, scanning every shadow. They didn't know that crosshairs were already waiting for them. At 0200 hours, the first shot rang out. One of Bravo's snipers crumpled before he even saw the muzzle flash. Seconds later, the second was gone. Chaos erupted. Machine guns roared from the ridges, tracers tearing across the night. Bravo dove for cover, but the valley was a coffin. Narrow walls, nowhere to run. Their comms sputtered with static. Jammed. From her station, Emma's fingers flew across controls, pulling fragments of transmissions through the noise. Mason's voice bled through, no longer cocky, calm, clipped, professional, as he called out enemy fire. Sergeant Reeves barked orders, trying to coordinate an impossible defense. Emma's jaw clenched. She knew how this ended. She'd seen it before. No air support. No quick reaction force in time. 8 men about to be buried in a graveyard of rock. Unless... Emma looked down at the Chaitak across her knees. Its weight felt like a confession. She hadn't fired it in years. What if she couldn't anymore? What if her hands betrayed her? Her left wrist trembled as she wrapped her fingers around the grip. But then silence. Not outside, but inside. Her old instructor's words echoed. When you're in the zone, there is no tremor. Only the shot. Emma stood, the decision carved into her like stone. She couldn't save Martinez, Fricks, or Yao, but she could save these boys. She slipped into the night. The mountains rose ahead of her, like teeth. She took a route no map would show, a smuggler's path she'd memorized during years of solitude. Loose shale crunched under her boots. Thorn bushes tore at her arms. Her damaged ear made it harder to locate sounds, but her instincts compensated. She climbed fast, fueled by urgency and something else, redemption. Her tablet buzzed with intercepted chatter. The enemy commander's voice surfaced among the noise. Calm, confident. He knew exactly where Bravo was. He was watching them die. Emma pressed harder into the climb. Her lungs burned, but she didn't slow. Each step was measured against the staccato bursts of gunfire below. By 02:47 hours, she reached the ridgeline. A perfect perch. A ghost's nest. She laid the rifle down, exhaled, and let the scope come alive with thermal vision. Through her lens, she saw the battlefield unfold like a chessboard. Bravo pinned, outnumbered 3-1. Machine gun nests covering every angle. Enemy squads moving with trained precision. This wasn't random Taliban fire, it was orchestrated. But Emma saw something else too. Patterns. Weaknesses. Mistakes. She whispered to herself, "All right, Commander. Let's play." Emma has taken position. The SEALs are seconds from annihilation. The enemy commander controls the battlefield. But Emma has a rifle, a line of sight, and the mind of a ghost. The valley below was a furnace of gunfire. Tracers carved the darkness, each streak a death sentence, hunting for flesh. Bravo hugged the rocks, pinned down from every angle. Their M4S barked back in desperation, but against overlapping machine gun fire, it was like throwing pebbles into a storm. Emma settled behind the Chaitak. The rifle's cold metal felt like an old friend, one that had waited too long for her touch. Through her thermal scope, the battlefield unfolded in glowing silhouettes. 3 machine gun nests controlled the high ground. Squads of fighters moved in perfect bounding overwatch. And there, the enemy commander, a phantom among shadows, watching everything with surgical control. Emma exhaled slowly, her breath fogged against the night air. First shot has to count. Not a kill, a fracture. She found him. Not the commander. Not yet. The forward air controller crouched behind rocks, tablet in hand, guiding drones and fighters like a puppeteer. Without him, the coordination would unravel. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder, echoing through the mountains. Through the scope, she watched the bullet smash into the tablet, shattering it into sparks and shards. The controller screamed, clutching his face, blinded by the fragments. Not dead, but broken. Down in the valley, enemy fire faltered. Orders garbled. Fighters shouted in confusion. Mason's voice cut across the chaos. What the hell was that? Emma shifted 2 inches, barely disturbing the dirt beneath her. She could almost hear her old instructor. Never stay in one place. Ghosts don't leave trails. 40 seconds later, another shot split the night. This time, the eastern machine gun nest. She aimed not for the gunner, but the ammunition belt. The round slammed into it. Sparks. A catastrophic jam. The gunner scrambled, frantic, exposed. Bravo seized the chance. Sergeant Reeves barked an order. Covering fire. Easter approach. Someone's giving us a window, move. The SEALs surged, repositioning, hearts pounding, disbelief mixing with hope. From her nest, Emma almost smiled. For the first time in years, she was back where she belonged. Shot after shot, Emma directed the chaos like a maestro conducting a deadly orchestra. She wounded when killing would have been simpler, because a screaming fighter sowed panic faster than silence. She destroyed equipment instead of bodies when it would fracture enemy confidence. She staggered her shots, making it feel like multiple snipers were hidden in the hills. And then her moment came. The enemy commander, furious, stepped into the open, shouting orders. His silhouette was sharp in her scope. The crosshairs found him like gravity. She squeezed. The bullet traveled 2,200 meters through humid mountain air. For anyone else, it would have been impossible. For Emma, it was muscle memory. The commander collapsed before he finished his order, and the battlefield cracked. Without leadership, the enemy force fractured. Some fighters pressed forward recklessly, others scrambled for cover, others broke and fled. Bravo moved. Mason led on point. His earlier arrogance burned away by fire and fear. Reeves coordinated the withdrawal, every man covering the next. But Emma saw what they couldn't. Another force, 20 strong, was circling from the south. Fresh fighters. A second hammer waiting to fall. If Bravo kept going blind, they'd run straight into the trap. Emma switched comms to an emergency frequency, her voice breaking the air for the first time. Bravo 6, this is Shadow 9. Negative on primary extraction. Secondary force inbound from Grid 37 North. Reroute along Ridge Line South to Grid 35. I'll cover. Reeves froze for half a second, radio pressed to his ear. Shadow 9. He'd never heard the name, but his gut told him to listen. Copy that. Moving south. And for the first time, Bravo wasn't just running. They were guided. Emma scanned her scope again. Her heart dropped. The enemy quick reaction force had already pinpointed her location. Thermal optics. Sweep lines. They were coming straight for her ridge. She had two choices. Fade into the mountains, live to fight another day, or hold them here and give Bravo time to reach safety. Her hand steadied on the rifle. 5 years ago, she whispered to herself, I followed doctrine. And they died. Not again. She keyed her mic one last time. Bravo 6, Shadow 9. Enemy converging on my position. I'll give them something to chase. You'll have 5 minutes of clear passage. Move fast. Reeves's voice came back sharp. Negative, Shadow 9. Send your coordinates. We'll. Emma cut the transmission, lips curling in a bitter smile. No, boys. You live. That's the deal. She fired 3 shots in quick succession, deliberately exposing her muzzle flash. The enemy forces roared with excitement, converging like wolves on blood. She slung the Chaytak across her shoulder, leaving the notched stock behind like an epitaph. The hunt had begun. Emma is now the prey, leading an entire Taliban force away from Bravo. But can one woman, wounded and haunted, survive being hunted through the mountains she once studied like scripture? The mountains swallowed her in darkness. Every rock, every thorn, every loose stone was a memory etched into Emma's mind. She had walked these paths countless nights, memorizing routes no maps showed. And now they were her only lifeline. Behind her, shouts echoed. The enemy quick reaction force had taken the bait. 20 armed fighters, fanning out with thermal optics, hungry to claim the sniper who had torn their ambush apart. Emma's boots slipped on shale. She caught herself, breath ragged, muscle screaming. The Chaytak was gone, left behind with its notched stock as her farewell. Now she carried scavenged weapons strapped across her back, an AK, a pistol, 2 extra magazines. Light, mobile, ghost-like. Her damaged wrist ached. Her hearing throbbed with phantom echoes. But her mind, sharp, calculating, was locked in. Survive. Distract. Led them away. The voices were closer now. Footsteps crunching. Weapons clinking. Emma crouched near a narrow choke point between boulders. She reached into her pouch, pulling out a tiny piece of wire and a grenade. Her hands moved fast, steady despite the pain. She rigged a trap, then slipped away, heart pounding in her throat. Moments later, a fighter rounded the rocks. A click. The explosion tore through the night, ripping stone and dust into the air. Screams followed. 2 down, more hesitating. Emma didn't wait. She sprinted uphill, lungs burning, shadows swallowing her whole. For the next hour, the mountains became a chessboard. Emma led them through box canyons, into unstable scree slopes where rocks gave way beneath their boots. She laid tripwires from scraps, turned terrain into weapons. Every delay she caused was another minute Bravo moved closer to extraction. But the hunters adapted. These weren't reckless amateurs, they were trained. They split into teams, circling, cutting off paths. Each time Emma thought she'd shaken them, their flashlights flickered in the distance again, hunting her heat signature. Her breath came sharp. Her left hand trembled when she reloaded the pistol. Blood soaked her sleeve where thorn bushes had ripped her skin. Still, she pushed forward. At one point, she slipped into a shallow cave, pressing herself against the cold stone. She could hear them outside, boots crunching, voices barking in Dari. She closed her eyes, and for a heartbeat, she was back in Kandahar. Martinez's blood on her hands. Yao's last scream. The silence after the gunfire, when she realized she was alone. Her chest tightened. Guilt gnawed at her like an old wound reopening. But then she thought of Mason, of Reeves, of the young SEALs fighting for their lives in that valley. Not this time. Her eyes snapped open. She checked her magazine. 6 rounds left. Enough. She moved again. But this time, she wasn't just running. Emma waited at a bend in the canyon, listening. Her damaged ear distorted the sounds, but instincts filled the gaps. She crouched low, pistol raised. The first fighter came fast, overconfident. She let him pass, then struck, silencer spitting, a single shot to the spine. He collapsed soundlessly. She grabbed his weapon before his body hit the ground, using it against the next man who appeared seconds later. 2 bursts. 2 more down. The others hesitated, shouts rising, confusion spreading. Emma melted back into the shadows. The ghost was hunting again. By 0400, Bravo had reached their extraction point. A Black Hawk lifted them skyward, rotors thundering, 8 men alive. But Emma was still on the ground, and the hunters were closing. On a ridge scattered with jagged rocks, she prepared her last stand. She had scavenged rifles, pistols, even knives from the fallen. She placed them strategically, creating kill zones. A web of survival. When the enemy crested the ridge, they walked straight into hell. Emma's first shots dropped 2 instantly. She rolled, switching weapons, firing again. The rocks exploded with return fire, sparks showering the night. Her body burned with adrenaline, pain forgotten. She moved like water, firing, relocating, vanishing, appearing again from another angle. Every time they thought they cornered her, another fighter fell. 11 enemy bodies littered the rocks by the time silence finally began to spread. But Emma was bleeding now. Her shoulder, her thigh, wounds that slowed her. And still she fought. At dawn, far away in the Black Hawk, Mason sat pale and trembling, watching the mountains shrink beneath him. "Who was Shadow 9?" he whispered. Reeves didn't answer. He just stared out the window, jaw tight. Then the radio crackled. A faint signal. Old Morse code, repeating 3 times. Mason frowned, not understanding. But Reeves closed his eyes, knowing exactly what it meant. Some ghosts never die. Emma's body may have fallen silent in those mountains, or maybe not. But whispers spread. A legend was being born. Shadow 9 wasn't just a sniper anymore. She was becoming myth. 72 hours after Bravo's extraction, a recovery team swept through the mountains where Emma Varga had made her last stand. The site told a story carved in blood and brass. 11 enemy bodies were scattered across a 300-meter stretch of rock. Each was placed with chilling precision, overlapping fields of fire like chess pieces abandoned mid-game. Piles of spent casings littered the ground. Some were from rifles the Taliban carried, others from Emma herself. She had fought with every weapon she could scavenge, turning the enemy's arsenal against them. Blood trails suggested she'd been wounded, perhaps more than once. But there was no body, no sign of capture. Only her Chaitak remained perfectly positioned, its scope still zeroed to the millimeter. 3 notches carved into the stock. A farewell. And beside it, weighed down by a rock, a single sheet of paper, covered in her strange, encrypted writing. When the codebreakers cracked it weeks later, the intel inside was staggering. Enemy supply routes, hidden caches, the names of double agents feeding false reports. At the very bottom, in plain English, were 4 words. Accounts balanced. Ghost out. Back at FOB Sentinel, Captain Robert Torres stood in the silent armory, the place where Emma had spent countless hours cleaning rifles for men who never knew her story. On the table in front of him sat a small box. Inside, 3 photographs labeled Martinez, Fricks Yao, a worn patch from a unit that didn't officially exist, and her notebooks, page after page of coded symbols, diagrams, tactical notes. Notes that would one day change how snipers were trained forever. Mason appeared in the doorway, no longer the cocky boy who once mocked a quiet woman with trembling hands. His voice was low. "Sir, the intel she left. It's all real. Every source, every position." She mapped the entire enemy network while she was just sitting here, in this armory. Torres's throat tightened. He nodded slowly. She never stopped being an operator, Corporal. She just found another way to fight. Official records listed Emma Varga as missing in action, her second such designation in a career that barely existed in ink. But outside the files, whispers spread. Taliban fighters began telling stories of a mountain jinn, a ghost who struck from impossible distances, who turned their ambushes into graves, who seemed to protect American soldiers with supernatural precision. The myth grew, a spirit of vengeance haunting the ridges, a shadow with eyes that never closed. And somewhere, on nights when the wind carried strange signals, radio operators swore they picked up old Morse code on abandoned frequencies. Always brief, always precise, always signed the same way. Command dismissed it as interference, atmospheric noise, equipment malfunctions. But those who served in the valleys knew better. They swore someone was still out there, watching. Mason carried his own ritual after that night. Before every mission, before every firefight, he'd check his rifle one extra time. Then whisper under his breath, for Shadow 9. When his teammates asked why, he never gave details. He just said, because someone's watching. Someone always has been. The habit spread. A quiet superstition among special operations units. A whispered tribute to the Guardian no one could name. Months later, FOB Sentinel received a new long-range communications array. Top secret, classified funding. Its algorithms could predict ambushes with eerie accuracy, intercepting enemy chatter before the enemy even acted. The technical manual came with it. Written in a voice Torres recognized instantly. Sharp, practical, brutally honest. Emma's voice. The last page contained a single line. For those who watch over the watchers. It saved lives. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. And so the legend continued. Not in headlines. Not in medals. But in survival. In the stories whispered between operators. In the chilling certainty that somewhere in those mountains, a ghost was still aiming through a scope no one could see. An intelligence analyst studying Emma's coded notebooks wrote one final note in her sealed file. Subject displayed unprecedented ability to process battlefield information and predict enemy behavior. Combined advanced mathematical models with intuitive psychological insights. These materials could revolutionize sniper training. Personal note, we didn't lose an operator. We gained a guardian angel. The file was locked away, sealed for 50 years. But truth has a way of surviving bureaucracy. And now, dear listener, I have to ask you, do you believe she died that night? Or do you think Emma Varga, the ghost once called Shadow 9, is still out there in the mountains watching? If you've ever known someone who carried their battles in silence, whose strength was mistaken for weakness, share their story in the comments. These shadows deserve to be remembered. Because some heroes don't seek medals. They don't seek recognition. They become whispers. Legends. Guardians who never stop watching.